Sandy Japp holds the Sarah Beth Brown Endowed Professorship of Marketing at Emory University's Goizueta Business School. She has been on the faculty at Wharton and MIT. So why the heck is she talking to us? Find out today on the Marketing Madmen podcast.
They say marketing is a madman's game. So now we turned it over to the Marketing Madmen with Nick Constantino and Trip Job.
Happy Saturday. Welcome to the Marketing Madmen. Trip Job and Nick Constantino here. And, we're going to school today, Nick.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
I tried to get out of there as fast as possible. I don't know if I'm ready to go back.
It's been a while. Every now and then, Emory and the Goizueta School let me back, and we are so fortunate to have a good friend of mine and the Sarah Beth Brown Professor of Marketing, Sandy Japp, is joining us today. And Sandy, welcome. It's great to have you here with us.
Hey, Trip, Nick, it's great to be here.
Yeah, and I think what we're hoping to do today is we want to get a little bit of feel of what you're seeing that's going on in both academia, but also the real world, because Sandy is not only a professor excellence over at the Goizueta School, but you work with a lot of clients out there. You've put out a lot of papers and presentations. I think we're going to get in maybe the middle section a lot on what's going on in e-commerce. I know that's one of your specialties, but why don't you give us a little bit of background, how you got into academia and wanting to teach this next generation of leaders?
Yeah, so my story of how I got into academia it's really just very serendipitous. I kind of fell into it. So when I was an undergrad at the University of Florida, my goal in life was to become a business person and make a ton of money. And so I went to business school, and then I realized, and I worked for a couple of years at Sunbank, which then became SunTrust and then Truist. And I realized that I needed a master's degree. So I went back to school at the University of Florida because, I don't know, there's kind of a lot of inertia in these decisions. And while I was there, the faculty kind of realized that, hey, you really should be getting a PhD in your PhD material. And up until that point, I really hadn't even thought about getting a PhD. I didn't really know what people in academia did. And like Nick, I was like, I'm working really hard to get out of here. And who would want to spend the rest of their lives in here?
And it gets more serious at every stage. The doctor is the commitment. I mean, you are committing like it is. You might as well sign your life away in blood at that point because you are going into. Yeah.
I did 5 years, and but on the other hand, what I've discovered is it is such a meaningful and awesome career. I've been doing this for about 30 years now, and to be frank, I enjoy it. It gives me a lot of autonomy, independence, and the best thing is it keeps me off the streets. So I didn't quite get that level of richness, but I'm not on the street.
What kind of business were you trying to get into? The School of Hard Knocks, it sounds like.
Yeah, and you've been at Emory for how many of your years?
22 years now. I know. And believe it or not, that wasn't even my first school. So prior to that, I was on the faculty at MIT in the Sloan School in Massachusetts. And, to be honest, I just hate winter. And so I left there and never went back.
And that's a long winter up there.
Yeah. It is forever winter.
My parents have been in the Northeast, and they're like, oh, so much pollen on the cars. I'm like, pollen on the cars?
Yeah.
We had that at the end of February. What the hell are you talking about?
Well, I know Emory's been glad to have you, and I meet a lot of alums over the years, and they've been so excited to have been in your classes. Unfortunately, it shows my age that I was at Emory before you came, but and it's probably a good thing, Nick, because I might not have gotten out of the class.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And look, I think the funny thing about academia is how it translates to the real world, right? You're setting these kids up to be successful and to go into the modern world, but the world is changing so fast. I mean, COVID has even sped up the pace of change even more so. So I think one of the things I want to establish and I'd love to talk about is, one, how you're preparing students for a future that's changing so quickly, but two, those academic principles, how they relate to the real world. And, one thing I know about writing a paper is my wife has been peer-reviewed and published. By the time it goes from theory to execution to countless peer reviews to publication, I mean, Zenny, you can correct me if I'm 2 years? 2.5 years?
2 years would be awesome.
And so how those papers and how those theories make themselves in such a changing, fast-paced world. So I think this is going to be a great episode about and how you read these academic papers and what the predictions are and how it relates to somebody who's in the weeds in the real world. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah.
I am too.
Yeah. So what what do you see today, and what do you tell your students? Most of these are grad students getting their MBA. As far as marketing and how do you see them ready to help companies? Because I'll throw one thing out different from when I came through. There's, I would say, a lack of generalists in the area of marketing, and yet I think there's businesses now out there that aren't big enough to have specialists. And so I think that's a little bit of a disconnect I see in the B2B world anyway.
Yeah. So there's definitely a balance. On one hand, we have a mix of students. Some are going into large organizations where they won't be able to they have to specialize, and others are starting their own companies. And I guess from an education standpoint, the good news is that a lot of the basic principles of business haven't really changed. The context, the setting that we do business in, as you all know, and the reason for this show is that it's nutso, right?
Yeah.
The wild, wild west. Everything can go and everything can happen. It's what makes it incredibly interesting. But at the same time, yes, Nick, we're an institution and we're a group of people that change very slowly. And I can tell you at Emory, one of the things that we're doing is we are racing to try and keep up with that. So some of the things that we've been doing lately is we are trying to offer education in a way that basically students want it. More hybrid teaching, more online teaching. It gives us greater reach and access, but on the other hand, it requires dinosaurs or vintage people like myself to have to relearn how we're teaching. And teaching online, I teach a hybrid course. I have taught all virtual courses as well. They're very different beasts. And so I think, like the rest of the world, we're running to adjust. And, we teach a lot of the same content, but we're trying to teach it in a format that is appealing and useful and meeting people where they are right now.
I have to imagine that the pace of change is also slowed by external factors, right? Just what's been going on with the government and how they're trying to crack down on what's being taught and what's allowed to be said at schools. I just have to imagine that, and parents are so much more involved, and everyone's entitled to an opinion, which is exhausting to think about. Yeah. I have to imagine, and again, I say my opinions as I want to. I'm just saying it's exhausting that everybody gets a voice nowadays, and I have to imagine that makes it even harder because everything's got to be thought over twice, and you can't offend this person, and then you got to be careful here. So I have to imagine keeping up with that pace, even as a private institution, doesn't necessarily have the same state guidance on it, is still really hard nowadays.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of wokeness out there, and there is a lot of fear about what can be said. And again, it's a balancing act, right? On one hand, professors are very much about freedom of speech. But on the other hand, if you're looking at a militant student group, then, you want to do the job of educating and sharing the right principles, but at the same time, if you're going to offend people, there's just no point, right? That's not going to work either.
Yeah. And I think it's a shame, too, because I think so much history in this country has started in educational systems and schools, and the best things and the worst things, but I'm just saying so much has come out of it. So the fact that you feel, censored isn't the word, but held back from what you can say and what you want to accomplish, I also think there's always cycles. So I think we'll end it. So what about the students? How have they changed? What are these kids like? Obviously you're a master's, you have high ambitions, probably come from a pretty well-to-do family, that you're set on the right path. Why are they going to get those masters? Do they feel they have to? Are they doing it because they want to advance their careers? What is that? How has that changed? Because I think that's an important fact also.
Yeah, so I'll give you my perspective. I don't teach undergrads anymore, but what I understand from my colleagues who do is that the undergrads that are coming in are very socially minded. They care a lot about social justice, about racial issues, and so we're finding a high demand for classes that deal with those issues. I would say at the graduate level, I teach mostly working professionals and executives. And These students, more than ever, they don't always come from privileged families. In fact, a lot of them, they're paying for our very expensive tuition themselves. And as a result of that, they are extremely motivated to get the most out of their education. And I love them so much for that reason. They come to class, they're prepared, we kind of move the needle on a topic, and then they go off, they think about it some more, and they have a lot of work experience, and I teach marketing channel strategy, a business-to-business class. So having a lot of work experience, as you know, Trip, is really useful. It's a very different world from B2C marketing and retailing, and so we have great discussions. And I just have really found it, even after 22 years, to be very refreshing and exciting.
Yeah.
And I think that's, one of the things, at times I talk to businesses that are looking to hire people, and I think, you hit on something. You can still teach people in your business, but what is that character or what's that drive? And when you have people who have stopped what they're doing to go back, pay for it themselves a lot of times, I think businesses sometimes miss that, and that how someone is going to take that drive and put it into their business. And I think there's a lot of times people look at it, they just have this degree, they want to be the next CEO. And I think if you dive deeper and find out more about the individual, you'll sometimes find those people who are really driven and can make a huge difference in your organization.
Yeah, you're so right, Trip. I can tell you, even at the PhD level, when we look at PhD candidates, even when we look at faculty members, they all look great on paper. They all have the credentials and everything, but it's really the individual drive and the motivation. For me, historically, that's always separated the A from the B from the C students, like particularly at MIT. Everybody is an Einstein to have gotten in there, but I still had to give A's, B's, and C's, and there really were differences, and it had to do with how much effort and motivation they exhibited.
Yeah,
well, I'm glad you can still,
Mm-hmm.
in grad school give B's and C's, because we know in high schools anymore you can't, because parents probably wouldn't allow it. But anyway, that's another topic, and when we come back from the break, you'll definitely want to catch this. We're going to dive into one of your areas, especially e-commerce. And there's a lot of people who have e-commerce businesses or trying to market out there. And I think you've got some just great stories and papers and presentations we'll dive into. And you're listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3. We'll be right back.
This morning in North Carolina, wheels are spinning. Determination is winning. A passion is now a thriving business, and it shows no signs of slowing down. How? The power of a conversation, like the one Clint Spiegel had with First Horizon Bank about starting a bike wheel manufacturing facility in Asheville. Now it's not just talk, it's rubber meets road. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Clint. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.
Now back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3 FM.
Welcome back. Trip Job and Nick Constantino here on the Marketing Madmen with our special guest, Dr. Sandy Japp, the Sarah Beth Brown Professor of Marketing at the Gozueta School at Emory University. And, we talked a little bit about your background, and I know because you've done several presentations for some of our organizations, but the area of e-commerce is one that I know you've done a lot of work. Why don't you just give us maybe just an overview? I know, Nick, you said in the beginning things have changed so fast. What's been the landscape? How do you see it? I guess maybe right pre-COVID, COVID, and now post-COVID, and we'll dive into a lot of different topics there.
Yeah, so the e-commerce landscape it's always been a long time fascination of mine. And of course, how can you get away from it? It's everywhere. But I will take you back 100 years. So, the internet sort of started and was invented by Tim Berners-Lee at MIT around the years that I was there. And I remember after having joined the faculty one year that my oldest colleague on the faculty, who was at that time probably in his 70s, he told us that he was teaching a class on marketing in the internet. And we all looked at him and we all thought, what do you know about marketing in the internet? And he's like, absolutely nothing. But this is why I'm going to teach a class and we're going to learn. And we looked at each other. We kind of thought, maybe there's something about this internet thing. And of course, we all moved into this area, and it is, as you know, one of the most exciting areas, not just in marketing, but in terms of how we do business, how we exchange, how we interact, not just around money, but with each other. It's and of course, at the risk of stating the obvious, COVID just really accelerated all that change for us. It forced us, whether we like it or not, into what is now our new normal, which we're still kind of figuring out and adapting to and changing all the time. So that has been fantastic. And as an academic, it really has been a career effort to understand how this works, to understand how and what is changing, whether it's the players, the interactions, the time horizons. It's really been a great place to kind of park myself in my research.
Yeah, I know it was an area that I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it, obviously on the B2B side, but I think that, and maybe that's maybe the first place to start is over the last few years, that accelerant, COVID. I do see where B2B has to start thinking more, around e-commerce. And what changes maybe have you seen, or, would you advise for businesses to think about?
Yeah, I think some of the most fascinating things that are happening on the B2B side, we're going to talk about online reviews and sort of how to manage that. And I'll talk about it from a B2B perspective today in terms of review platforms. But aside from that, I would say sales, online sales, distribution, Amazon. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is really that's an amazing landscape, and the speed and the acceleration of what's new, the fakery, the counterfeitness, and all the possibilities against the complex task, as you know already, of just managing channels, existing channels, retail channels, indirect channels. Now you've got all these rogue resellers that are doing whatever they want with your brands, with your products. It's nutso. And when you think about, wow, Amazon's big, it's billions of dollars, but then you add on at a world level, Taobao, Rakuten.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just distribution of brands, it's like the distribution of private labels.
Yep.
The largest brand in
and
the world
they've all
is a
become-
private label.
They've all become advertisers too.
Right.
So one of the craziest things is you go on eBay and they're advertising other stuff. You go on Amazon and they have their own ads mechanism built in.
Yep.
So not only are they selling you stuff, but now they're taking your data and exchanging your data also. So
Yep.
ancillary revenue sources. I mean, just the world has changed. So and one of the things you say about B2B I find most fascinating, your digital presence, it doesn't even have to be your sales. You need a digital existence because your corporate structure and who you are to the world and your legacy may not match who you are on the internet. I had the pleasure, I was up, Pirelli, very famous tire manufacturer. If you buy a Lamborghini, it's got Pirelli's. Formula One, Italian company. Their corporate headquarters is right here. Their U.S. office is right here. I was meeting with them, and their strategy, because this is an old Italian company, they've just missed the boat in the past couple of years. Their internet presence doesn't reflect the prestige and prominence of the company. So what happens is, what if you don't watch F1? What if you think, oh, this is some high, but no, they make tires that same price as Goodyear tires that you could put on your car that are better performers. They missed that connection. And because of a website, because they weren't selling directly to a consumer, they didn't think that way. And now they're behind the eight ball and watching competitors pass them by. So I think your e-commerce strategy isn't always what you're selling, but it's the brand and presence in which you are showing on the internet. Now, the opposite could also be true. You could also be the worst company in the world and have the flashiest website, because we've all seen it go that way also. And usually those are the ones that are the flash in the pan. They'll do well with one product and then they go. But I think when you talk about e-commerce, I think these days it is more than just what you are selling. You're selling a legacy of yourself. And if that doesn't match who you are as a company, I think there are big problems there.
And I want to segue from that into, I know, some of your work, which is those third-party e-tailers, right? And you mentioned a lot of them. People know Amazon, but if you're not selling directly on your site, Etsy, Rakuten, all the others. So why don't you give us a little bit of some of the work you've done and some of the top to-dos and not to-dos in that third party.
That's like drop shipping, right? We're talking about being like a drop shipper.
Right. Yeah. So the problem of drop shippers and all these rogue resellers, so you have the problem where a lot of these third-party people, they could be like a group. There's actually like a group of moms, right, that will go around, and as soon as a major sale drops at a store or at Costco, they'll text each other, everybody go out and buy the quantities, and then they'll resell the stuff on eBay, right? So that's so you've got organized groups like that. But then you also have individuals. I teach a case in my class of individuals who will post a posting or a picture of a product being sold on Amazon, on eBay, and will actually charge $20 or $30 more than the listing on eBay. They don't even, these intermediaries, they don't buy and hold the product. All they do is post it out there. They take the money, they place the order. And of course, this creates huge problems for the brand, particularly when people find out their product is from Amazon, they've overpaid, and then they return it to Amazon. So it's control over your brand, your reputation, your products. I would say, of course I could go into detail on this, but I would say some of the top things to do when it comes to e-commerce, and I would tell this to every small business and small, medium-sized business owner, is don't do this yourself, right? Yeah. Don't do this at home. It's a dangerous business. I think if you want to be online, if you want to be on Amazon, especially, it's going to take all you can just to monitor where your product is.
Yeah.
So I would say
you got to sell a lot of it, right? You just say make it $20. So to make a career, you got to be selling 500 goods. The amount of time and effort, that is not easy practice.
Yeah. Amazon's fees are substantial. There's a reason
I know
for
eBay.
them.
eBay is 15% because I sometimes buy and resell watches. It's more of a hobby than a business.
Amazon's
but you're talking
north of that.
15%.
Yes.
But you're talking, I'm exchanging $4,000 watches.
Yes.
So 15% is a substantial chunk of change coming out of, and then tax now. Tax was left out of e-commerce for a long time, and I know because I took advantage of that for a long time. All of a sudden, the transaction flips because now you're paying 8% tax and 15%. You're losing 23% no matter what you're doing on a purchase and a transaction. So,
yeah. And the biggest issue is control and knowing how to sell on these platforms. Knowing how to sell on these platforms is not the same way we sell through sales forces, not the same way we sell through indirect channels, through big box retailers, anything like that.
Always an algorithm.
Yes, which is exactly why I would say if you want to sell on Amazon, you need someone who specializes in selling on Amazon. You want to be that sole source for the product on Amazon. You don't want to allow rogue resellers in. You may have to hire a company that all they do is just what's the word? Scratch like the internet, right?
Right.
To make sure to monitor your prices all the time.
Yeah,
and
which means more
scrape.
fees.
Yeah.
Now you have more. Now you're paying more people back. So you better have a damn good business model. If you're doling out all that money, and then at that point, is it better to just set up your own e-commerce and sell things directly yourself?
You always can. But I will tell you, that's hard too.
It's right.
It's really hard.
It's very similar to the world of content monetization now, right? Like you can put your content on YouTube, sure, but YouTube's taking 50% of that money. But then to implement your own system where you have your own website, your own thing, then you don't have no chance of going viral. So it's a similar world where you have to decide between how much control you have over it and how easy it is to make things spread and go viral. Amazon's a big site. Lots of people are going on it. John's Plumbing Supplies might not have as big of a site. So I think it is a tough, and I think that it benefits those companies to set it up that way.
It gets back to a basic of marketing 101. It's what's your go-to-market strategy? Do you have a strategy? Do you understand all those pieces? Should you be out there? Should you deal with distributors? Should those type of things? And it's really understanding that. And there's almost no free ride. So it's there's a matter of you're going to need to pay somewhere. What's the right place to pay and play? Yeah.
And I would say more than ever now, it's also about word of mouth. Right? What kind of word of mouth do we want to generate? Because if we've learned anything from social media, it's that you absolutely cannot control the word of mouth. Just look at Bud Light, right? They're down 21%. That was all word of mouth that they didn't control, right? So,
and not only that,
they tried to control.
They tried, then they actually all they've got is the 1% because they've torqued off 49% on one side and 49 on the other.
Well, you went from extremes, man. You went from one side of the political spectrum to back to the American flag and the eagle flying around in a commercial. You didn't go in the middle. You went from one extreme to the exact opposite, and then you pissed everybody off. And again, it goes back to the same thing. Everybody has an opinion, and now everybody has a platform to voice said opinions, right? Yeah. 20 years ago, something like this happened. Yeah, it would have went underground, but it went in one little town, one bar might have been pissed off. Now, the PR spread everywhere.
There's a couple bars in Alpharetta that already have, they pulled 2 weeks ago, they pulled all Anheuser products.
Well, let's say the biggest problem with that, right? The biggest problem with that is not that it happened. It's that once you drink something other than Bud Light and you realize how bad Bud Light is, they're like, uh-oh, there's real beer out there. Oh, my goodness. And it's not even a criticism of Bud Light. It's just light beer in general. The world has advanced so far past that there's so much good beer being made.
I don't drink any of that anyways, but
what
yes,
I'm saying,
but
what
it's
happens
true.
What happens when you go from Bud to Stella? It's the same company, but if you Bud Light and then you have a Stella, you go, they've been making this for 200 years in the Czech Republic, and I'm drinking rice water? What is this?
Sounds like you should write a review.
No,
That's a segue.
I drink as much Bud Light as anyone. I'm just saying, that's the problem. You turn people off quickly, and they try something else in that time frame, and who's to say they're going to go back to it? Life is about, we know this, nowadays it is about getting you on that hook. Unfortunately, a lot of times it comes with a subscription that they don't put up front and they screw you with, but it's getting you on that hook. So once you say yes to a sample or a trial, then you forget about it. All of a sudden, your credit card's being dinged with it. It's the same thing in that world. Once you try something else, what's going to stop you from going to something else? People are not as set in their ways as they were because they're being bombarded by marketing messages, 600 a day. You are every angle, everywhere you turn, you are hit by a marketing message. The good ones make it subliminal, but honestly, we're marketers. When was the last time you got subliminally marketed to? It's pretty obvious when you're being marketed to, but most people don't know that. They don't feel that. They're subconsciously being marketed to, which makes it really, really hard these days.
All right. So, Sandy, your opinion on that? What?
That was a Nick rant, by the way.
That was every now and then we always have a Nick rant, but how do you respond?
I do agree that marketing is about constant messaging, strategic messaging, with a platform, with a program, with a point of view and a perspective. I think that's why I will tell you myself that I'm a little kind of anti-marketing messages. So I try to limit my social media. I do not watch commercials. I mean, I will pay companies to not make me watch or listen to commercials. And because I know it's all strategic. And as much as they're trying to make it better and more customized to the way you want to be marketed to, there's, it's still not there.
And as new technology comes, it gets worse. So this is an example, okay? On Hulu, for example, so I watch shows, whatever it is. I have seen more ads for HIV, for PrEP, than anybody in the world. Like, I'm talking two every single commercial break. So that is such a small population that is fitting towards. The internet is supposed to be able to give you the targeting to go after the right people. Mm-hmm. So the fact it is, and I'm watching programs with my kids and I'm seeing this stuff. So like, that is an example of, they thought this technology was going to be so great, but all of a sudden now there's probably some kind of government mandate and they're promoting it because they have some deal with the FDA. Who knows what the deal is? But it's a good example of, I like watching marketing to say how bad these companies are doing of reaching the right people. Like, who is making that decision to sit and air this on a Tuesday afternoon when I'm watching programs with my children? That is a waste of money, and you're just pissing people off now.
Yeah, there's someone's just pushing a button. But let's get back, because I know you recently published a paper and we talked about it. From the review standpoint, why don't you tell us a little bit about the research? And I know Nick and I will have a bunch of questions about how what's the applicability for the listeners out there.
Yeah, well, obviously, reviews are everywhere, and they are so critical to our purchase decisions. Getting more information and understanding, especially around things like an Airbnb rental, a vacation, a cruise, a particular wine, all of this information is learned from reviews, and reviews are paramount. So, but the thing about reviews, right, what do you think the number one issue is about these reviews?
Are they real people?
Are they real people?
Yeah. How could a supplement on Amazon that has existed for 3 days have 6,000 reviews already?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the issue of fakery, in other words, I would flip that over, and I would even say the issue of trust. It's all about trust. Can I trust these reviews? Can I trust the platform that is showing me these reviews? And really, like anything else in business, how do we build that trust? Right? And if you think about it, building trust online on these review platforms is really different from how we build trust face-to-face or how we have always built trust in business. So in business and even in our personal lives, we build trust because we've met each other a couple of times. Like, I've met Tripp. I know Tripp is who Tripp says he is. And
what you know.
As far as I know, yes. But this is like real-life interactions more than once. And so, if Tripp were to tell me, hey, I purchased this product and it was really good, then I'd be like, okay, I'll trust what he's saying, and I might purchase the product too. But of course, online, that's not the way trust is built at all. But we need trust in order to make the decision based on somebody else's perspective. So a lot of companies, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about review platforms, and by that I mean companies like Yelp, like Angie, TripAdvisor, Trustpilot, all these platforms that basically, they're not necessarily, selling you stuff. They're just managing information. They're managing review information from what you hope are qualified users. And what we're going to talk about, and really what this research is how they go about building trust around those reviews, gaining the trust of customers to go back to that platform consistently to look for review information.
They're looking for people to engage with them, right? I mean, that's Yelp's idea.
I think rapport is the word. Like the problem is that when you know Tripp, you have developed a rapport with Tripp, which allows trust to be gained easier. What are these sites doing to build that rapport first?
Yes.
They're not. It is a matter of you should trust it because it's Yelp. I'll tell you right now, I know some of the first 3 or 4 employees of Yelp from the very beginning. They were saying, pay us for advertising, and those 1-star reviews might wink, 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 sneak away pretty quickly. And they've been gaming that system now for 10 years. And luckily, they've all left Yelp, so I can say that out loud. But this is not a new thing. I think one of the other obnoxious things, have you ever gotten a supplement on Amazon? It actually says on the bottle, they'll send you a free one if you give a 5-star review and send a picture. So they're even telling people, they're not even hiding it. They're telling people they're doing it. They're not even afraid to do it. And then me, I'm like, oh, cool, I want a free bottle, but I'm never buying that again. You just gamed a review. You didn't do anything.
Yes. And so, in fact, I mean, there are statistics like TripAdvisor has said that 97% of the fake reviews on their platform come from friends, family, from companies being paid from financial incentives. And as customers, we all know, actually, this is kind of a little sad statistic, but we all know that there's just so much fakery going on out there. But we still use reviews. And in fact, there is actually a term for this. So researchers have determined that people have what we call a truth-lie base rate, which is that we know that a lot of what we're seeing is lies. But as long as we feel like a certain ratio of the truth is there enough relative to the lies, we continue to use that platform and rely on it for information. So we all know.
Wow. But I don't think that's a bad thing. Not necessarily. I'll give you an example. So back in the day, you're in Rome. Okay, you're in Rome. And what would you do when you're in Rome? Well, if you don't know any better, you're probably going to go eat at the biggest tourist trap in Rome, which knows it's a tourist trap. Now, what if you're in Rome, you go on Yelp, and you do restaurants nearby? You look at 3 with the highest reviews, and you pick which one of those 3 you're going to go eat at. You will always have a better experience doing that. So I think there are situations, TripAdvisor is another great one. Right. If you pop up in the middle of freaking El Paso, Texas, how the hell is you going to know what's going on? If you know how to read the reviews and understand how to use them and, a certain number and stars and authenticity, I think these are very powerful tools. But I also think at the same time, most people don't think through it that much. And they're falling victim to the tricks and the tactics.
Is there power in numbers? Because, I look at that a lot of times.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. And that's actually, that's one of the questions that one of the reviewers on our paper raised is, well, is it really about what the platform is doing, what Yelp does, or is it really about the reviews themselves, right? And if it is the reviews, then isn't it about the number of reviews or whether or not there's consistency and all of these things? And, the short answer is that it's really not about the reviews itself. It's not about that. That plays an important part. But if you really want to earn the trust of customers in terms of looking at those reviews and trusting your platform, it's really about how you manage that whole thing. Now, think about this, right? So if you're Yelp or you're TripAdvisor, you've got, on one hand, a huge party with consumers, right? Consumers, they come to your platform to read about and understand different products, experiences, restaurant experiences. On the other hand, another big constituency are all the businesses that are trying to sell to those consumers as well. So what you want to do, and then, there's another constituency, and that's the reviewers themselves who leave information. Hopefully they are verified customers. And like Nick said, you're an organization, you're a company who you're making money too, right? So, and yeah, I'm not saying that everything is clean and above the board. There are gray areas and everything, but think about how complex this is. It's not just managing a buyer and a seller. It's not just selling to a customer. It's so complex. So what you need to do as a platform, what you really have to do is you have to think about, okay, what are, I call these my sandbox rules, right? If you come to my platform, how are you going to interact? What are the rules, right? What am I going to do to assure you that these reviews are trustworthy and that I'm doing everything I can to verify it?
Yeah, no, I think one of the ones, and we may have to do this when we come back from the break, but from a product, let's get away from services. I think we're all kind of have a sense of that. But Dick's Sporting Goods is one. I buy a lot of sporting equipment, golf equipment. I will say that I use their site a lot of my research because they manage the reviews and respond. I say manage. They respond to them. And, if people have a complaint, they're pretty good about quickly apologizing, working to a solution. To me, I think that's probably one of the areas that creates more trust. When we come back, though, I definitely want to get your view.
We got a problem with that, though, mister. That's called AI is going to be the big problem there because that's going to be inauthentic soon, too.
So I think that's an interesting one.
Segue.
But we're about to break here, but we'll hit that when we come back. And you've been listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3.
This morning in the Atlanta airport, no one's missing a meal on Mac Wilburn's watch. With 11 restaurants to serve passengers, he's got dining for every destination. And it all started when Mac talked with First Horizon Bank about opening a franchise in the airport. Now it's open for business and cleared for takeoff. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Mac. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.
Now back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3 FM.
Welcome back to the Marketing Madmen. Trip Job and Nick Constantino here with Dr. Sandy Japp of Emory's Gozueta Business School. And we were talking about, like I said, I use Dick's Sporting Goods as an example that, I think they do a good job of responding to the reviews. I don't know if they see enough negative reviews, they start pulling product or not, but at least they respond. So how does that work and within the research that you did? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so in this latest research, we kind of looked at a number of things that platforms could do to kind of try and build that trust. So that's a great example, responding to reviewers. We didn't look at that particular practice in particular, but we looked at some other practices. Like, let's just kind of brainstorm here for a minute, a thought exercise. What do you think a platform could do that would cause you to trust the reviews that you're reading on there, to give you some assurances that those reviews aren't fake, that they're not.
I'm going to throw a curveball out there. I think having a brick and mortar, I think having one where you can interact with people, and I think Dick's, one of the reasons they do a good job is because that brick and mortar, you can tangibly touch the product, which makes the reviews feel more palpable, and the brick and mortar is probably one I would say that I think can really help.
Yeah, whether it's a chat bot or a live customer service agent that they can click on that page where you've got the
reviews. Community involvement, somehow being involved in your local community and being someone who you see around there in the community probably would help.
Yep. So these are all face-to-face things that companies can do, right? And so what we want
and they're hard to fake.
They're hard to fake. Yes, exactly. Because just like in the old days, right? The way Tripp earned my trust was because I knew him. I knew who he was.
And that rapport.
I interacted with him several times. I had rapport. But now let's think about Yelp. Like, how do they build that community online when they don't have a brick and mortar arm? So it turns out some of the things they do, and when I say these things, you'll probably go, oh, yeah, I did notice that.
Like the community manager program and things like that?
Yes. So they have an area where reviewers can talk to customers. You can ask your questions. The reviewers can respond. And so that's kind of hard to fake, right? Because
and then
if it was
the elite
a company,
squad, like the elite people that are at a higher level.
Status.
So both my friends were community managers. And I would go to the elite events, and you would take people who engage the most and give them an extra level of benefits, and now they become liaisons.
Yep. And so those are people you can trust. You can trust what they say. Another thing they do is they'll say, well, we have a group of people, real people, and we use algorithms to monitor anything that looks fake, right? Reviews that have incomplete sentences that don't make sense, maybe something that looks like it's from ChatGPT. We're trying to detect all those things mathematically. Another thing they'll do is they'll say, well, you know what? If you're a cheating business, we're just going to tell the whole platform you're a cheating business, and we'll put it right on your listing.
Unless you're a paid
right?
advertiser. Unless you're a paid advertiser.
Is there an icon that denotes a cheating business?
Yeah,
we got to
sometimes.
come up. I mean, that would be great to come up with that,
Yeah.
so people know that. Oh,
Some
hey, this one
platforms
has
will
been
do that.
identified
Yes.
as
Or
questionable.
this one's been removed.
Right, removed
right?
or questionable.
Yes, removed because of fakery or something like that. So we looked at all of these different things, and the other thing, the last thing they will do, or that we looked at, is this idea of, well, if you're going to post a review, post your picture,
Right.
post your name, and where the city and state,
Yeah.
right? So a picture of me, Sandy, Atlanta, Georgia. And so the idea is that then people will think, well, okay, it's not ChatGPT. Well, it could be.
Yeah, could be.
But it's but at least it looks like it could be a real person.
Yes, and some people do the verified purchase, where
Yes.
it's got to be connected to your
Yes.
login or something that you actually made that purchase,
Yes.
which again sounds easy in theory, but probably the back end of that is not as simple as we think it is.
Right. Oh, none of these things are actually easy to create. So the question in this research was really, okay, well, which of these practices, we see lots of them, we see all of them when you look at the marketplace, but which ones are really the most effective, and what do you need and what don't you need? So I'm going to give you guys 5 choices, a multiple choice test.
All right.
Do it.
And you tell me which you think are the most important. First one is monitoring, just using algorithms and people to detect fakery. The second one is exposure, labeling the bad players, the bad sellers, maybe even the bad reviewers. The third one is status, giving reviewers status. The fourth one is kind of a Q&A community between allowing reviewers to talk to customers and customers to ask questions. And then the last one is identity disclosure, so revealing who you are, posting a picture. Which of these things are the most important, or you can even rank order which one
The
you
most
think.
effective from the
Most
research you've done.
effective
In gaining trust.
In gaining trust in the reviews and in the platform and what's going on
I would
there.
put Q&A last probably because that's an easy one to fake in my head.
Yep.
Okay.
I would say that the having the community people have those people, like those elite people, would probably be one of the top 2. Status is
Okay.
one of the top 2. Trip, you got it?
I think identity is probably going to be in the top 2 as well. I think my only thing with community, I think it's great, is just sometimes I don't want to go that deep, So
Well, I think the community gives you that feel of a connection, and I think people just in this day and age long for a connection. I think most people in political parties you long for a connection in a group, and as we get more separated from people really socially face to face, it gives you that false sense of you're in a social situation. So
I think monitoring is important. I just don't know that people understand it, so that may be in the middle. So
Yeah, I think monitoring is actually pretty high. I think that if you're monitoring and you're really genuinely monitoring it because your interest is to make this a better platform, I would probably put monitoring in top 3. I would say monitoring 2. I would say your identity check is number 1. I would say 3 would be Q&A. I would say I forgot 4, and then 5 would be the Q&A. 3 is community, 5 is Q&A.
So we have the drum beat.
Wait.
And the answers?
And what about you? Do you agree with that, Trip?
Again,
You're
I think
agreeing with
identity
Nick's
is
choices?
one. I think monitoring is important. I just don't know that people understand that. So I don't know if that's gonna be 3 or 4 in my view. So
What you got?
All right.
Drum
So-
roll. I'll put the drum roll in after. It'll be an after effect.
Okay, good. So it turns out that identity is actually the weakest thing
No
you
way.
can do.
wow.
Is it weak because it hasn't been figured out how to be done the right way? Is it weak, or people just don't want to do it? Because I would imagine if it's done the right way, it would be just powerful. It's just I don't see it often.
Right. So it's weak because the other 4, the effects of the other 4 are so much better and so much more effective.
Right.
And probably easier to implement.
At creating trust. Right. So the number one thing that you can do to create trust is to communicate. And so this applies, for Yelp, TripAdvisor, but even if you have a review section for this show or for any company, any place where people are leaving reviews, if you just advertise and let them know that, you know what, we regularly check these reviews. We strive to make sure that the reviews are authentic. We do this with the use of humans. We do this through the use of algorithms. Believe it or not, that is the most effective thing you can do. It's even more important than what the reviews are saying themselves.
Do you have a good example of a company that does that really stood out in the research? Is there one that comes to mind that really does a good job of that?
Yeah. A lot of the companies that we interviewed, like Trustpilot, Yelp, they do that. TripAdvisor, they're doing that. And so a lot of companies do this. It's one of the most common things to do. It's actually the most effective. The second most effective thing you can do is to expose the bad players. To say, these firms, this restaurant, a lot of its past reviews were generated by the workers in the restaurant, right? Or were paid for by a company. So to shame them, right? Wow. That's the second best thing you can do. And identity exposure is actually the weakest. And the reason why is because all these other things, even like status is a better thing to do, to give reviewers, best reviewers status, or even to just allow reviewers and potential customers to talk to each other. That's even better. Because all of these other things, they go more directly to just reducing fakery, making it hard to do, right? Identity disclosure, you could be putting anybody's picture out there.
Yeah, no, Sandy, this was fantastic. I'm going to make sure we list the order when we do the when we release this on LinkedIn, so that everyone has.
No, let's do it as a poll first, and let's see what the general people say.
That'd be a great idea. We'll do that.
If they just botched it as bad as you and I did.
Yeah, no. So that's a great idea.
I love that you guys are marketing experts and you took this test. Very brave.
We failed. Yeah,
very brave.
Again, Sandy Japp, Professor Sarah Beth Brown, Professor of Marketing at Emory University. Thanks so much. You've been listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3.
This morning in North Carolina, wheels are spinning. Determination is winning. A passion is now a thriving business, and it shows no signs of slowing down. How? The power of a conversation, like the one Clint Spiegel had with First Horizon Bank about starting a bike wheel manufacturing facility in Asheville. Now it's not just talk, it's rubber meets road. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Clint. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.